Hello everyone and welcome to my Wild Rift tier list for patch 6.1D. Over 15 champion changes this time around. Honestly, not too much has really changed in terms of the meta. I think that some of the buffs were really good quality of life changes and they were quite nice buffs. Some of the nerfs were definitely needed, but honestly, I just don't think they hit the right mark with trying to weaken some of these really OP champions like Corki and Nocturne. I still think they're very, very strong. But of course, we got to talk about the new champion Zilean, which is where I'm going to be starting things off. We're not going to start off in the Baron lane. We're going to start off in the support. I played a few games of Zilean yesterday. I think a lot of people are building Zilean wrong. Every single time I'm watching videos at the moment, or I'm trying to watch streams, or even in my own games when I'm playing against the Zilean or with a Zilean, a lot of people are trying to build Zilean ability power, full damage, and trying to be more of a carry. That's not what Zilean is. Zilean is more of a supportive champion. Your second ability is so insanely strong, being able to give a ton of movement speed, shielding every single time. And of course that works with things like Ardent Sensor, Harmonic Echo, items like that. And you just build full supportive. Your first ability doesn't do that much damage. And your first ability is the only ability that does damage. So you focusing on building full ability power and full damage when only one ability does that, not very useful. Most of the time you use your first ability just for utility, just to try and land a stun. The third ability is crazy broken, slowing projectiles, like things like hooks, like Thresh Hook, things like Misfortune ulti, absolutely insane. And of course your ultimate, the ultimate in the late game, by the way, has a 35-second cooldown. 35 seconds, absolutely disgusting. I'll be very surprised if this champion doesn't get hotfix nerfed in the next few days. I think his champion is way out of control at the moment. I don't think you want to play in mid lane. I don't have a mid lane build for him yet. I did like kind of predict a mid lane build, but I just don't think the champion should be touched in mid lane unless you want to play a more supportive mid laner. Wave clear is just not very good in general, but in support, incredibly powerful. Like I said, a lot of people are building him wrong. A lot of people are really playing him wrong as well. So I'm going to be doing a video in the next couple of days explaining to you how to build Zilean and how to play Zilean as well. But if you want to check out the build early on, make sure you check out my website, Wild Rift Fire. I'll leave the link down in the description. And of course, if you enjoy the content on this channel, just a quick reminder, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, because I do Wild Rift content on this channel every day. Live streams, tier list videos, ability breakdowns, new champion breakdowns, which I'll do in the next couple of days, and of course more. In terms of the rest of the support tier list, I just don't think anything or anyone matches up to Zilean right now. I think Zilean is by far the best support. Of course, Seraphine did receive a nerf as well. She is still pretty strong, but of course she's not going to be as strong as Zilean right now because Zilean is just really overpowered. Seraphine's still going to be very good, even though they did nerf her shielding on her second ability and also nerf her cooldown. I still think she's going to offer great utility in team fights, and she's still a great support to play. Nautilus is probably the best, or one of the best tank supports now, up there with Ornn, Maokai, and Blitzcrank. Nautilus buff, in my opinion, was definitely unneeded. You didn't really need more tanky stats. You didn't really need more damage. Again, the problem is I just can't put anyone in the same tier as Zilean right now. I just think Nautilus is strong, yes, but he's just not in the same tier as Zilean. You play against the Zilean, that Nautilus tries to hook you or tries to use ultimate, you can just slow it down. Like, it's just going to be much easier. It gives your team more time to react and reposition. Even things like hook as well. Slowing hook is just very powerful overall. In terms of the rest of the S tier, I think most of the champions have pretty much stayed the same. All these champions still work very well. You know, Leona, if you want another tank support, Lulu, Soraka, and Nami are the best enchanters right now. Other than that, nothing else has really changed. And then we move down to the A tier. We have Thresh, who also received a buff. I played a few games of Thresh. I have a really fun Thresh gameplay to actually show you in the next few days. I think Thresh as a champion, the AD buff was really nice. I just don't think the champion is tanky enough at the moment compared to champions like Nautilus or Ornn, Maokai, Blitzcrank, even like Leona and Alistar. The champion has a lot of carry potential, like Thresh in itself has a lot of carry potential, but in terms of tankiness, in terms of trying to be a frontline and trying to make plays throughout the game, he's just not as tanky. But he does have a lot of outplay potential with his kit and also his damage in the early stages of the game. I moved Milio down as well. I just don't think Milio at the moment is standing up to the same as you know, Seraphine, Soraka, and Nami and Lulu. It's very hard to put Milio in that same category, especially with Seraphine moving down as well. I was thinking, like, you know, in terms of enchanter supports, who really goes on par with someone like Seraphine? Of course, Lulu is just still a very, very strong support to play with the amount of HP that you give and the healing and shielding. Soraka as well, keep healing 24/7. The AoE silence is very powerful, and Nami's still one of the best laning phase champions right now at the moment, and you still make insane plays in late game. So I have moved Milio down. We still have the unique supports in here as well, like Nunu and Jarvan. Both these champions still work great. Of course, Nunu received the buff, but I'll explain that a little bit more in the jungle section. Overall, other champions, you know, you can still play like carry champions, like Zyra can still work, Lux can also work, as well as Karma. These champions can still work pretty well. But like I said, overall, not really too much else has changed in the support tier list. It's mainly just Zilean coming in and just destroying at the moment. I mean, you need to pick him or ban him in pretty much every single game right now. If you have someone on your team or someone against you that knows how to play Zilean, knows how to play around his ability, especially his first ability as well, knows how to build him, he's going to be very, very scary and very difficult to play against. So yeah, that's everything for the support. Baron lane, I've moved a few champions up. You might be thinking, like, you know, what's going on the Baron lane? There's so many S+ tier champions. I think this just shows how broad and how open the Baron lane is right now. I think there are a lot of champions that you can play right now in the Baron lane, a lot of great carry champions in the Baron lane, which is pretty much all your S+ tier champions. You know, before this, I had Wukong, Na, and Rumble up in the S+ tier, sorry. I moved Jax and Aatrox up. I think both these champions definitely go on par with some of these other champions like Wukong, Na, and Rumble. I think all 5 champions in the S+ tier, you can pretty much play in every single game and you'll have a great chance at trying to win. I think all these champions offer great damage, great utility, great team fight potential. You can even split push as well at the same time. I think all these 5 champions are very, very strong. But to be fair, S tier is also very strong as well. There are a lot of strong champions in here. Of course, Fiora did receive a really nice quality of life buff recently in the previous patch. With the ultimates, now the bug fix now going away, so you can proc your auto attacks on your ultimate straight away. The first ability now scales with movement speed in terms of how quickly you dash. They did nerf her damage a little bit, but I think the quality of life changes outweigh the nerf to the first ability. And overall, Fiora is a really nice champion to play. Split pushing team fights. Overall, is a great carry champion to play in the Baron lane. Volibear, we got a nerf to Volibear. I just don't think it's enough, to be honest with you. You'll hear me say this a lot. There's a lot of nerfs to some champions in this patch that I just don't think is enough. Volibear's damage is still out of this world. Yes, they reduce his healing and also the shield duration on the third ability, but the damage is really the problem with Volibear. The second ability with Volibear, the damage that you're able to deal, and when you keep stacking it over and over again with the passive damage on top of that as well, his damage is crazy. His healing is still great as well. His shielding still works fine. It's like 0.5 second different. Like it's not going to make that much difference at all. So Volibear, still a very strong Baron lane champion to play. In my opinion, not up with the S+ tier like the other champions, but definitely up there as one of the strongest right now. Garen, we didn't really talk about the rework. The rework was really interesting. The last time I did a tier list video was before the rework for Garen. Garen came in with the rework, stomped the rift, was completely broken. Then it was a hotfix nerf, which kind of brought him a little bit back down. I still think he's very powerful. The good thing about Garen is that he's just very easy to play. You know, if you need a beginner champion to play in the Baron lane, you just pick up Garen. Super easy to play, very beginner friendly. He's one of the best champions to play right now as well. You know, you can still carry with him and he's still really, really annoying to play against. So if you haven't tried Garen's rework since it came out a few weeks ago, then definitely give it a try. The Nautilus buffs also helped him really in the Baron lane. I've moved Nautilus Baron lane from B tier up to A tier. I haven't actually tried too much or actually at all really of the Nautilus Baron lane. I've had it a few times like in my games or against, and it's looked pretty strong. And I think that overall the buff to both the first ability damage and the third ability damage helps his wave clear and also helps him just in terms of trading and trying to help him in the Baron lane. You go for this more like utility style build with Iceborne Gauntlet being very powerful. You then have like Thornmail, Frozen Heart. You just more build like a tank, but you're still going to do a lot of damage now because his base damage has been increased and also his tanky stats have been increased. Definitely a champion that I think we have to keep our eye on. I'll probably try it in the next few days as well to see what he's going to be like in the Baron lane. But yeah, definitely overall can be a very strong champion. Hot pick to definitely look out for. Darius buff, I thought the buff would have been a little bit better than what it looked like. Like the numbers itself looked pretty big, but in terms of the game itself, it didn't really make that much difference. I played him a few times in the Baron lane. I've also played him a few times in the jungle as well. I just don't think the buffs are really... He's still a good champion, you know, don't get me wrong. I think that the problem with Darius is a very coin flip champion. You know, if you can get your passive stacked in the early game, if you can get an early kill and snowball in the early game, then great. If he doesn't snowball, then sometimes he can fall a little bit behind. You know, he needs mobility. He needs to get onto the back line. Sometimes Darius can just struggle to get onto the back line. If you don't have Protobelt, if you don't have any mobility abilities at all, like maybe Ghost or Flash up, it's very difficult to try and get onto the back line. And there's just so much CC and so many ways to stop Darius from jumping onto the back line. Really kind of this champion that needs a reset with the ultimate and then needs to kind of snowball from there and keep rolling and rolling. If he doesn't keep rolling, if he doesn't get a reset with his ultimate, it can be a little bit difficult. But again, as I mentioned, you know, I think the champion is still going to be completely fine this patch. Mordekaiser moved down to A tier. I just think the Mordekaiser overall, I still think it's a good champion to play. I just don't think his damage and his tankiness is on par with the other S tier and S plus tier champions at the moment. I still think he's strong. You know, A tier champions are still strong champions in the right situations. So Mordekaiser is still fine, but I just don't think I can put Mordekaiser in the same tier as like Garen, you know, Olaf, Fiora, Nasus, Volibear. Like, I think all of these champions are better than Mordekaiser at the moment. So I moved Mordekaiser down. I also moved Ryze down as well. Ryze can still work in the Baron lane, just not as well as maybe the mid lane. His early game, of course, his damage got nerfed quite a lot a few patches ago with his third ability and also his first ability. So he can't poke as much and he can't bully out Baron laners as much as what he did before. So he's moved down into the A tier as well. And then, of course, Ambessa rework. It's not out just yet. It's out in 2 weeks' time, I believe. I believe it's the 26th of June, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 26th of June. So it's out in 2 weeks' time. So definitely keep an eye out for that one. I'll make sure to keep my website updated with the tier list if any of the champions change. And also in terms of builds and everything as well, if anything gets updated, if I test anything as well. But I think overall, the Ambessa rework is going to be quite nice to test. I'm not too sure. I think it's probably going to be weaker than what Jungle Ambessa was before. But it's nice to see they're trying to shift Ambessa to the Baron lane because the champion was just way too strong. Way too strong. I mean, we've seen how armor penetration can affect champions. You know, Garen, with the armor penetration he received, he became completely broken. Ambessa is now going to get free armor penetration when she upgrades her ultimate, like it's a passive. So that's going to be very interesting to see if that does change anything at all. Onto jungle. Again, Nocturne did get nerfed. I just don't think it's enough. I think this champion just works so well in solo queue, and I think it's a champion that the ultimate is very powerful. You can snowball in the early game. You can carry a lot in the early game as well. And if you can snowball, you can be really strong. Amumu, of course, is still going to be up here as well. No touches to Amumu at all. Again, maybe not as strong in high elos. Maybe if you're reaching like challenger or you're reaching high ranks at legendary queue, you won't see a lot of Amumu. But Amumu is just this low elo stomping champion and still very stable for any situation during the game. Nocturne as well, also you know, again, it's going to be very strong in terms of his jungle clear, in terms of carry potential, and it's still a great champion to play. So you know, for me, it just doesn't change at all. I don't think Nocturne moves down into, you know, down into S tier. I just still think he stays on par with the you know, with I was going to say Ambessa, Amumu, sorry, as the S plus tier champion. Nunu moving up to S tier. I think Nunu was already pretty strong last patch, to be honest, as a tank jungler. There's not really a lot of tank junglers at the moment outside of Rammus and Amumu. Nunu is a great alternative to that as well, and also can still be a great carry. Does a lot of damage, can have a lot of zoning control with his second ability and also his ultimate. The buffs were quite nice as well. More shielding with his ultimate, more damage with his first ability, and also more healing as well, which for me, you know, moves him up into S tier and allows him to be, you know, another tank support into the meta, which is really nice to see. Pantheon did receive a buff, but again, I just don't think the buff is enough, to be honest with you. It's like 10 damage on his first ability and 10 damage if you crit on your first ability, so it's not going to make too much of a difference to Pantheon. I still think he stays in the A tier. Quickly talk about the other S tier champions. I think, again, nothing has really changed in terms of jungle meta. Jungle meta is still pretty much the same. There are still different variety of champions you can play here. You have the AP scaling champions like Lilia Morgana. You have the AD assassins like Wukong and Zed. You have bruisers like Riven and Viego that still have a lot of great carry potential. Or maybe you want more utility champions. Jarvan and Vi are still very powerful. So overall, the S tier hasn't really changed, too much. Diana also stays in the A tier. Again, the buff is nice. I think especially the third ability buff, I think is really nice. She can do a lot of burst damage and she can be a great carry, but overall, again, I just don't think that she's on par with some of the other champions that are in the S tier at the moment. Again, some of this might change. Some of my opinions might change once I test these champions or when I play against or with some of these champions. I might see a little bit more from these champions that maybe I didn't see before or I didn't see really with the buffs, but I just don't think... I think most of the buffs and nerfs just didn't really make too much of a difference, to be honest, in terms of the meta and where we're sitting at the moment. Fiddlesticks, though, did move up to B to A. I still don't like this champion. I still don't like how easy it is to just invade Fiddlesticks and how easy it is to just put the champion behind. He's so weak during the early game. He's, like I said, he's a walking minion in the early game, just trying to farm up, get to level 5 as soon as possible. But again, it probably works in lower elos. Like, it's a champion that, again, kind of like a Mumu, if you play him in high elos, like in Legendary Q or something, or in, Challenger Plus, you're going to get invaded. You're going to be put behind because people know that Fiddlesticks is very weak during the early game and you can't do nothing. You can't contest any jungle camps in the early game and you're going to be very weak. But if you're in lower elos, and if you get junglers that don't really understand that, then you could just easily farm up and just be a great carry. I think the damage numbers were quite nice for Fiddlesticks, especially the second ability as well. Definitely going to help him with this jungle clear. But again, it's very hit or miss champion. You'd have to be very, very careful when you're playing Fiddlesticks. Make sure that you're not against like any early aggressive champions that are going to look to try and invade and try and put you behind in the early game. Ambessa as well, of course. I mean, Ambessa jungle is probably dead after the rework. Again, I have to test it out. I'll have to see what Ambessa is going to be like, but I think Ambessa is going to be completely dead after the rework. We'll have to see, how it works. Again, the rework is not out, so Ambessa still stays in A tier for now. Poppy, I still think the champion can still work in jungle. I just don't think it's maybe as good in terms of a carry. You kind of build like a hybrid of damage plus tankiness, and that's kind of the difficult part about Poppy, is that she's not good if you build full tank, she's not good if you build full damage, so you kind of have to build in between, which makes it very difficult as a champion to try and carry games and to try and make it into team fights and make the champion very useful when it comes to playing in the jungle. Of course, jungle is a very impactful role that you get a lot of gold. Sometimes you get the most gold and most experience on the team. So you have to play champions that can make a big difference. Champions in S tier and S plus tier, for example. Poppy just isn't really that champion. I still think the champion can work though in jungle. It's still pretty good. Darius jungle, I just don't think still works. I don't think the damage to jungle Darius did anything at all. Same with Jax as well. You might have realized that I've now added Jax into the jungle role. I didn't have him before in jungle role. I've added a new build in for him. I don't think this champion's still good in jungle. I did actually win a game with Jax jungle, but again, it's very hit or miss. The problem is with these champions like Jax and Darius is that your jungle clear speed is very, very slow during the early game. Like Jax's jungle clear is like 150 to 2 minutes. Same with Darius. Same with champions like Yone as well, who have also moved down into the B tier. Again, Yone is a champion that... These champions have great late game potential. If you can farm your jungle safe, if your laners don't get too far behind, and if you can just keep AFK farming a jungle over and over again, once you get 2 or 3 items, the champion's great when it gets into team fights. You're great. But it's just about that early game. Your early jungle clear is so slow. You can't really make a lot of impact in terms of early skirmishes or trying to fight for scuttle grabs in the early game. And again, if your laners get too far behind, then it's going to be very difficult for you to keep farming, keep getting items, and keep getting to a point of the game. You need to delay the game as much as possible with these champions because their jungle clear is just way too slow. But yeah, Jax, Yone, and Darius all sit down in B tier. There are other champions in here that I still think could work well. The Fiora buff can make Fiora jungle definitely a lot more viable. We'll have to see if maybe that changes in terms of the tier list, but I just think that for now I'm keeping Fiora down in the B tier. And Gragas as well. I think Gragas just doesn't really have a lot of damage, doesn't really have a lot of burst damage at the moment. I just think Gragas in general is just not a good jungler. I think Gragas actually, probably Gragas's best role right now is support or top lane. Gragas is just in a very weird spot. You don't know where to play him. He doesn't really fit any role, to be honest with you. He's just a very weird champion at the moment in the current meta. Again, in the mid lane, no S plus tier champions. I didn't want to move up. I don't think Ahri deserves to move up into S plus tier. I still think she has some struggles in the early game. I still think her damage output in the early game is still very weak. Her scaling still works pretty well though. If you go for, you know, items like Malignance, Lichbane, Death Cap, you know, your late game scaling after you get to 3 items, and your catch potential is great, but early game is still pretty weak. The base health buff is really nice, helps her a bit with survivability and allows her to trade a little bit more and farm. The range advantage now on the second ability, and now it dishes out faster, is also very nice. But again, I just don't think the champion is good enough to put into S plus tier. Like, I don't think Ahri is better than all of the other S tier champions. And to be honest, I don't think there are any mid lane champions that deserve to be up into S plus tier at the moment. I think there are strong champions in the S tier, you know, a lot of champions that have great carry potentials. Aurelion Sol, Swain, Syndra, Heimerdinger, like all of these champions are great at the moment in any scenario. No, a lot of these mages are very good, but I can't say to myself that Orianna is better than them all, or Victor is better than them all, or Ryze is better than them all. Like, I can't put any mid laners better than the rest in terms of S plus tier. So that's why they've all stayed in S tier. Again, the mid lane meta hasn't really changed too much. Ahri is just going to be a lot more viable now and just a bit stronger. Katarina moved up to A tier. Again, Katarina, very hit or miss champion. I think the buffs were very nice overall. Her damage output is now going to be a lot higher. But the problem is that if you're playing against a lot of crowd control champions, and if you're playing against these champions that can stop you in your path, can lock you down, you know, Nautilus, for example, you know, is a great example of someone that could just lock you down. You just have so many ways to, you know, CC Katarina and just burst her down from 100 to 0. So it's very difficult to play her in some scenarios, but I think the buff was very nice. You want to go for Ignite for Katarina, but you feel like you need to go Cleanse, but then Cleanse doesn't let you snowball in the early game. It's a bit of a difficult champion to pull off, in my opinion, at the moment. I have moved her up, though, from B tier to A tier again. I think the buffs are nice, and I think the buffs are, you know, pretty decent overall. Corki nerf, I did move down to A tier in the mid lane. The base AD, especially in mid lane, is going to hurt Corki a lot. Laning phase for Corki before was very, very powerful. You know, it's very strong with the high amount of base AD that you had. Your abilities were doing a lot of damage. Your third ability was also doing a lot of damage as well. You're actually going toe to toe with some of these mages as Corki mid, but now with the base AD nerf, it's going to be a little bit more difficult now to play Corki mid lane in terms of playing solo 1 versus 1. But I still think Corki is good in the dual lane, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. Yasuo buffs, I just don't think it's good enough. Again, you know, I think that they're really trying to force people to play crit Yasuo, but just the champion in general is very difficult to play. Crit Yasuo just feels like it's just never going to work. It's nice that they're trying to keep buffing it over and over again. But I think tank Yasuo is just a lot more reliable, and it's just a lot more, to be honest, a lot more damage, a lot more reliable damage as well. Whereas if you're going in trying to one-shot someone with crit Yasuo, you can also get one-shot yourself. So it's just a lot more reliable to play tank Yasuo. Again, I left him in A tier. I just don't think the champion's buff was enough to warrant him moving up. And then B tier has pretty much stayed the same. I don't think anything has changed in the B tier at the moment. All these champions are pretty much the same. Nothing has moved around. I don't have any more notes in terms of the mid lane. But yeah, I think the mid lane meta is pretty decent. You know, there are some A tier champions here that you can still play. You know, pretty underrated ones like Veigar and Vladimir can also do very well. The problem with these two champions is just their early game is very weak, but late game, if you can get 3 items with Vladimir or 3 items with Veigar, I think both these champions can work very, very well. Into the dual lane, again, Corki nerf was good. I think the Corki nerf is nice. I just think his passive is just way too broken still. I think his true damage that he gets from his passive is just way too powerful. The base damage on AD is nice. It means he lowers his early game. The problem with Corki before, and what made him so broken before, was that he had so much damage in the early game, and he was winning trades in the early game, and he also was the best scaling late game champion. Now his early game is not that strong, but his late game scaling is still one of the best out there, if not the best out there in terms of late game scaling. So that's why for me, Corki still doesn't move out of the S plus tier. I still think the champion's very safe to play. If you can play with enchanters, you can play with tank supports. The champion does a lot of damage. I just think the nerfs weren't enough. I think we probably need another Corki nerf, to be honest with you. And just overall, we need more nerfs to some of these champions that did get nerfed before, like Nocturne as well. And also, again, you know, Zilean hotfix. I'll be very surprised if it doesn't come on through in the next few days or maybe next few weeks or something. But yeah, Corki, yeah, overall, really nice champion to play, and the nerfs were just not enough, in my opinion. In terms of the rest of ADC tier list, nothing else has really changed. I did move Samira up from B to A. I think the Samira buffs are very nice. The problem with Samira is that if you're not on the same page as your support, it can be very difficult. You, of course, need to play tank supports more than anything else. But yeah, just Samira, need to make sure that you play tank supports, you play with a duo queue, and then this champion can do well. Solo queue, it might be a little bit more difficult, but it is a very snowball heavy champion that if you get an early game lead, then you can be very, very strong. Draven, I just don't think is very strong at all. I think the buff was okay. I just don't think it's worth anything. You know, the problem with Draven, ever since the whole change in terms of the base health and base armor of all these champions, everyone's just super tanky now in the early game and just very difficult to kill. The Draven's damage doesn't go on par to it. Maybe him himself is a little bit tankier, but that doesn't matter. You know, Draven is about snowballing. It's about getting early kills. And with Draven, you just play passive and you just win the game by playing passive and just staying behind your tower and just waiting for a gank or waiting for the Draven to make a mistake. Obviously, Kalista rework's not out yet. That'll probably be out in the next few weeks as well. And of course, I already spoke about support. So yeah, overall, not too much has changed in terms of the meta. Again, I think some of the buffs and nerfs were nice. It does definitely push the power of these champions down, like Corki and Nocturne especially. I still think the champions are some of the best to play. It's just not going to be an insta win every single time now, which is nice. You know, these champions are still strong, but it's not going to be an insta win if you pick these champions and you're going to be, you know, running over the game every single time. You know, you have to know how to play against these champions and how to you know, how to output and how to be a real carry when it comes into late game. Again, I'll keep the tier list updated. I'll keep the builds updated. Make sure you keep an eye on the website. Of course, Ambessa rework is in 2 weeks time. In 3 or 4 weeks time, we'll probably get the Kalista rework as well. So still a lot to, you know, unpack and a lot to kind of figure out in terms of the rest of 6.1 in general until patch 6.2 comes out in the middle of July. So hopefully you enjoyed this tier list rundown for patch 6.1D. Again, just a reminder, if you do enjoy the content, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care. Peace.